You already know her name, or at least you think you do. Pocahontas, the mischievous young woman who supposedly defied her own people, fell in love with a brave English adventurer named John Smith and saved him from certain death, the one who bridged the gap between two worlds, creating a moment of peace that would shape the future of America. It's a story drenched in romance, sacrifice, and unity. It's the story we've been told since childhood, in classrooms, in storybooks, and even in brightly colored animated films. But the story we've been given is not the one that actually happened. The truth is far more complicated, far less romantic, and far more revealing about the way America's history was written by the victors for their own purposes. The real Pocahontas was born into a position of power as the favorite daughter of a paramount chief in one of the most influential native confederacies of the East Coast. She grew up in a world of political maneuvering, delicate alliances, and the ever-present need to protect her people's land and resources. When the English arrived at Jamestown in 1607, they stepped into a landscape that had already been shaped by centuries of native diplomacy, warfare, and trade, and yet through clever storytelling, the colonists would make it seem as though nothing important existed here until they arrived. To learn who Pocahontas really was, we need to strip away centuries of invention, see her not as a romantic figure, but as a young woman whose life became entangled in the ambitions of two very different worlds, one she was born into and one that would eventually consume her. Before English sails appeared on the horizon, the Powhatan Confederacy was already an established power in the Chesapeake Bay region. Under the leadership of Wahunsenacao, called Chief Powhatan by the English, over 30 Algonquian-speaking tribes were united in a network that spanned rivers, coastlines, and inland forests. Each member tribe maintained its own chief, or werowance, but paid tribute to Powhatan in the form of food, copper, furs, and other valuable goods. This tribute system didn't just enrich the paramount chief. It kept the Confederacy stable, ensuring cooperation in times of need and presenting a united front against outside threats. This was the world into which Mataoaka was born, around 1596. Her given name was Amanute, but her nickname, Pocahontas, meaning playful one or the mischievous one, stuck with her. Growing up as the favorite daughter of Powhatan meant she was not a bystander in her people's political life. She would have been exposed to councils, ceremonial exchanges, and the delicate negotiations that kept the Confederacy functioning. She learned the importance of alliance, the art of diplomacy, and the subtle balance of strength and generosity that defined Powhatan leadership. The Powhatan were no strangers to Europeans. Spanish expeditions had been sniffing around the Chesapeake since the 1500s, and the Confederacy had likely heard stories, some first-hand, about these pale-skinned newcomers with their weapons, diseases, and unpredictable demands. When English settlers established Jamestown in 1607, they were not stepping into an untouched wilderness. They were entering an already claimed and carefully managed world. To Powhatan, the English might be dangerous, but they could also be useful. They had metal tools, beads, and weapons, items that could enhance Powhatan's power if the relationship was managed carefully. But managing them would require skill, patience, and, as it turned out, a willingness to use every political tool available, including his own daughter. The part of Pocahontas' story most people know comes from John Smith's own pen. According to Smith, sometime in late 1607, he was captured by Powhatan warriors and brought before the paramount chief. He claimed that as he lay with his head on a stone, warriors prepared to execute him, until Pocahontas, just a girl of about 11 or 12 at the time, rushed forward and threw herself over him, saving his life. It's the centerpiece of the legend, a single dramatic act that supposedly changed the course of history. But there are problems with this story. The first is that Smith didn't write about it until 1624, 17 years later, long after Pocahontas had died and when she was already famous in England. Before that, in his earlier writings, there's no mention of any such event. Many historians believe what Smith experienced was not an attempted execution, but a ceremonial adoption ritual, a way of formally incorporating him into the Powhatan political order as a subordinate ally. In that context, Pocahontas's role was not to save his life, but to play her part in a scripted performance meant to symbolize kinship. The English misunderstood or deliberately reframed the event to fit their narrative. And let's be clear, there was no romantic element. Pocahontas was a child. Smith was nearly 30. Their relationship in those early years was defined by politics and necessity, not moonlit love affairs. Still, in the months that followed, Pocahontas did visit Jamestown at times, bringing food and acting as a messenger. But these were acts sanctioned by her father, part of an ongoing effort to manage relations with the unpredictable newcomers. The idea of a young girl defying her father to secretly help the English is an invention of later storytellers, not a reflection of reality. For a brief period, there was something resembling peace. The Powhatan provided the English with food in exchange for tools, copper, and other goods. Pocahontas occasionally appeared at the settlement, a familiar face in tense negotiations. But underneath the surface, the relationship was fraying. The English came not just to trade, but to take. They expected the Powhatan to submit to English authority, to provide tribute without question, and to make room for their growing settlement. The Powhatan saw the English as guests who were rapidly overstaying their welcome. When John Smith left for England in 1609 after a serious injury, the fragile diplomacy collapsed. The winter of 1609-1610 became known as the starving time for the English. Jamestown was surrounded by Powhatan forces, trade was cut off, and starvation was so severe that colonists resorted to eating rats, shoe leather, and in some cases, the dead. The English retaliated with armed raids on native villages, burning homes, destroying crops, and taking captives. By this time, Pocahontas's life had shifted away from the English entirely. She was entering young womanhood and may have married a Powhatan warrior named Kokum, as oral histories suggest. She was living within her people's world, likely with no idea that the English would soon draw her back into theirs by force. In 1613, the English executed a plan that would permanently alter Pocahontas's life. Captain Samuel Argall learned she was staying with the Patawamek people, allies of the Powhatan Confederacy, and conspired to kidnap her. With the cooperation of a Patawamek chief, likely under pressure, Argall invited Pocahontas aboard his ship under the guise of friendship. Once she stepped on deck, she was taken hostage and sailed to the English settlement at Henricus. The English sent word to Powhatan: "Return our prisoners, give back our stolen weapons, and provide a hefty ransom, or your daughter will not be returned." Negotiations dragged on for months. During her captivity, Pocahontas was taught English language and customs and instructed in Christianity. Whether she embraced these changes willingly or as a means of survival, we cannot truly know, but in 1614, she was baptized as Rebecca. That same year, she married John Rolfe, a tobacco planter whose crop would transform Virginia's economy. Rolfe's own letters, reveal he saw the marriage as a way to bring salvation to the natives, a statement that underscores the political and religious motives behind the union. For the English, it was a public relations coup, proof that the New World could be tamed and its people remade in the English image. For Powhatan, it bought a temporary peace, but at the cost of his daughter's freedom. In 1616, Pocahontas, John Rolfe, and their young son Thomas were sent to England by the Virginia Company, the corporation funding the colony. Her presence was a calculated display. She was living proof, they claimed, that the English could civilize the so-called savages. Pocahontas was dressed in fine gowns, attended banquets, met nobles, and was even presented to King James III. She also encountered John Smith again during this trip, and according to his account, she reminded him that he had once called her father a friend, but had broken his promises. This moment, if it happened as Smith describes, shows a young woman still conscious of her people's dignity and the betrayal they had suffered. But behind the polite receptions and staged appearances, Pocahontas was far from home, surrounded by strangers, her image controlled entirely by the English. Then, in early 1617, just as she prepared to return to Virginia, tragedy struck. She fell gravely ill near Gravesend. Some said it was pneumonia, others tuberculosis, and some whisper that she may have been poisoned. She died at around 21 years old, buried in a foreign land, never to see her homeland again. After her death, Pocahontas's life was rewritten by the English into something that served their narrative. The story of a kidnapped political hostage was turned into the fable of a willing convert. The girl who may have participated in a ceremonial adoption ritual became the heroine who saved John Smith's life out of love. The young woman whose marriage was a political truce became the symbol of peaceful unity between colonizer and colonized. In truth, her life reflected the imbalance of power in the early years of English America. The Powhatan Confederacy suffered greatly after her death. The peace her marriage had brought collapsed, and wars resumed as the English expanded their settlements and claimed more land. Her son, Thomas Rolfe, grew up between two worlds, carrying both English and Powhatan heritage, but the story of his mother was already being reshaped into something unrecognizable. Today, the name Pocahontas is known across the globe, but the real woman, the girl named Matawaka, is often lost beneath the layers of myth. To remember her truthfully is to remember that the birth of English America was not a romance, but a collision. Her story is not about harmony, but about power, how it is negotiated, taken, and rewritten. And that truth may be the most important untold secret of all.